Hello everyone, Daryl here. How you doing today? Another beautiful fall day here in Michigan in the mid 60s, and today I went to get my leaf blower out and do a little work cleaning up the yard. It's the weedeater blower vac model 200 BV200, rated 200 miles an hour. It's a nice solid leaf blower for an inexpensive model, and it's easy to operate. It's got the throttle and choke controls here right on the side, a primer button for easy starting, and fuel here, pull start here. No throttle trigger because it's a set throttle. You just set it where you want it and leave it alone. Easy access to the spark plug on that side, and it's got a vacuum attachment on the bottom you can hook up a vacuum tube to suck things up. But I use it just to clean the sidewalks off and the edge of the roads, and maybe might blow my patio here off a little bit. But I went to start it, and I'm pushing on the primer button, and instead of feeling the fuel flowing through it and some pressure building up, I'm hearing a squeaking, whistling noise, which tells me that the fuel is not getting sucked up. So I think first thing I think is that the fuel is empty, but clearly I can see on the fuel gauge here on the side it's almost half full. So what I did is I laid it outside, opened up the fuel cap, and inside I could see the pickup tube floating around. And actually, down in there, I found the pickup tube had broken off, which tells me that the fuel lines on it have decayed. The additives and alcohol that they put in modern gasoline these days is very hard on the rubber and plastic components, especially in small engines. And what's going to happen here is we're going to have to disassemble the unit, get inside the fuel tank, and replace the fuel lines. And it's not a particularly easy job, but it can be handled. You can do it yourself and save some money. We're going to start with taking the cover off of the carburetor using a T25 Torx driver, or it's also slotted, so you can use a straight bit screwdriver if you don't have the T25. Now, once the cover plate's off, we're going to use a 4mm Allen head to remove the two screws that hold the other cover, secondary cover, off. Alright, you can see this is allowing us to gain access to the fuel lines coming from the carburetor. One's a supply line, the other's a return line, and those go through this opening down to the fuel tank. So in order to access that part of it, we're going to have to split the case open. Again, we're going to use, I hope it's the same size, we're going to use our, pretty sure we're going to use the same size here. Let me see. Yep, our Torx bit's going to fit that, even though I think that's also the 4mm, that's actually a 4mm hex, but the T25 Torx will fit in there as well if you don't put too much force on it. Alright, I removed 9 of those screws in various locations around, and then 2 short screws for the muffler cover, which revealed 2 hidden screws here and here, so a total of 11 so far that I've removed, plus the manual release knob here for the discharge chute, which allows that to come out easier. And we'll just set that out of the way. Now, with those 11 out, I believe the whole thing will be ready to come apart. Let me go check. Alright, 2 more screws on this side. We had to remove the intake manifold spacer block and gasket. And now it looks like it's ready to start coming apart. We can spread it like this. And we can pop out the handle. Let's get that out of the way. Now if we work it carefully, very carefully, we may be able to extract the fuel tank without removing the bottom flap or the springs and pins down there on the bottom part of it. We're going to try and do that so we don't have to fish all that stuff back together and get it lined up. When we get done, it'll make it a little easier. Alright, this is going to work out okay. We're not going to have to totally disassemble the rest of it, thank goodness. We won't have to worry about getting the pins and the locators back in the right spot, because when we take this and spread it apart here, you can see the hole right next here. Where's where one fuel line comes out? The other one's supposed to come out right next to it, right there at that hole, right there. So we're going to be able to feed the replacement line in through that hole. And I'm pretty sure that's the intake line, the suction line that picks up the fuel. So I'll be right back with another tool and I'll show you how we do that. Alright, here's the results from shaking out the fuel tank. We have the fuel pickup line, which is what I suspected, has totally deteriorated and fallen apart. The fuel pickup filter and weight is still fine. These really don't go bad. They never really need to be changed. If they get dirty, you can clean them with a little brush or soak them in fuel and brush them off or blow them out with air. They really don't get dirty though. So we're going to see if I have some fuel line like this, and if so, we'll be back in business. Alright, I found some fuel line which I have left over for another project. Should be just about the right amount, might be a little on the long side. One thing I always do is when I take and I cut the tip of it on a 45-degree angle. That makes it easier to push it down through the hole when it's time to push it through the tank. I also have a fuel line puller tool that I purchased. Basically it's a piece of wire with a hook on the end and a ring attached to actually give you leverage to pull the wire through tight spaces. And in this case, that tool is not going to work because the wire is actually too big to go through the small hole that the new fuel line has to go through. So we took our angled cut and we started the angled cut down through the hole. We use this plier here as kind of like a tool to brace it and give us a little bit more leverage to reach in there. And then we're just going to keep screwing the fuel line down and in until enough of it's in place to reach through and grab it through the filling spout. Alright, to make it easier, we pop the tank right out. So we're pushing the fuel line through the hole, then we reached in with our finger and pulled it out through here. Now we're going to cut it off square, like so, and attach our fuel line to that. Our fuel filter and weight, our intake weight. You want to make sure there's enough line inside the tank for it to flop around and actually reach the very bottom of the tank. And you can see down in there that it's on the bottom of the tank now and it flops around because your fuel tank on this lays sideways like this. So you can see it's in there. The fuel return line was stiff and cracked, so we're going to replace that too. I have one more little piece of fuel line left here, so we're going to replace them both. And now we'll work the fuel tank back up into position in the body. Now we feed the lines back through the access hole. We make sure the tab for where the fuel window is in its groove down here, and that this spout lines up here. The other thing is to make sure when you put this back together that the pull cord is behind that metal safety pin there. See, the pull cord goes down there. You gotta, as you're pushing this together, you gotta make sure it goes behind that metal guide rod. So we're gonna, before we push it down, we're gonna reach in with a screwdriver and push it back out of the way and drop it down behind it. Alright, that was super easy. I just used this Torx driver, pulled the fuel or the starter rope just behind that metal roller, and then let it sit there and then squeezed it in place. Now I'm going to tighten down some of these other bolts or screws on this so that it doesn't pop back apart again. Alright, the first time I had this insulator here had fallen off, that rubber star-shaped insulator had fallen off, and I had the fuel lines through the wrong hole. So we've relocated the fuel lines through their proper access hole. That there is the mount for the rubber insulator. So now it should all go back together smoothly. Alright, very successful. Now we're going to put the cap on here just to make sure that doesn't come apart anymore. And a couple things we need to get on here before we go any further. We need to get the handle back on. The handle needs to go into place now because, you know, once you put those screws back in and tighten the case together, you won't be able to get that back in. So we're going to put that in now. Alright, we've got that back in place. Nice and everything clips together super easy. Now it's time to start putting all these screws back into place. Alright, we're all back together. That cost you maybe an hour of your time and $4 for the fuel line. If you would have taken this into a repair shop to have done, there's no doubt in my mind it probably would, the bill would have probably been $60 to $75, which really is more than it's worth to have an old leaf blower like this repaired. So you saved the leaf blower from the trash pile, you save some money, and you feel good about yourself for being able to get this done and do it without having to take it somewhere. And that's the best feeling of all, knowing that you did it yourself because you put a little effort in and tried to make it happen. I want to thank you all for watching. Check out my channel for other cool videos and things. I've got exploring Michigan, some Disney videos, a lot of auto repair videos, and there's going to be more and more small engine repair videos because I've neglected those lately.